Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey guys, real quick, before we jump into the episode, I need you to do the 3 S's for me. What is that? First of all, I need you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss an episode of our podcast. Number 2, I need you to share it with your family and friends. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else. Lastly, I need you to say something. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you want to see from us, what you like, what you don't like. We are open to your suggestions. We want to know everything that you want to let us know about the podcast. All right. Now, get back to the episode. All right. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure that you listen, like, subscribe, and share to our podcast on all of your social media platforms. Also, make sure that you guys are checking us out on our new YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Again, that's the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube, where you can not only find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which is one of our podcasts, you can also find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys are going there in order to check us out on that podcast. Also, our product of the week, as you guys know, we are a self-sustained podcast. And one of the ways that we stay on the air is by bringing you amazing products for you to purchase. And so our product of the week this week is our Deal, Heal, Fulfill tee, right? And you can find it at dealtohealtees.com. Again, that's dealtohealtees.com. I'm actually wearing it today. For those of you that are listening, it is a black tee with the words Deal, Heal, Fulfill in color on it, and it says deal with the problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Make sure you guys go there. The link is in the description. Man, I'm messing up. The link is in the description. I have 200 episodes and I'm still can't get it right sometimes. The link is in the description. You can go to dealtohealtees.com. That's deal, the number 2, healtees.com in order to get your t-shirt, right? So the dealtohealtees.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. Y'all know what? I'm messing up today because I am so excited. I am so excited. Today, we are actually celebrating this episode. This is our 200th episode. 200 episodes. I've been doing this for a little bit over 4 years, man. And it's been such an exciting journey. And I know, 200 episodes, that's a long way to go. So today, what I wanted to do is really just kind of go back from the beginning and to share with those of you who may have came on later on into the journey. Maybe you came on around the 100th episode. Maybe you came on around the 50th episode. But I wanted to just take the time today really to just go back and tell the story of how, I even got here with the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. And I want to leave you with 4 tips. At the end, I'll leave you with 4 tips in order to, if you are a podcaster, or not just a podcaster, but anything that you go to do, but definitely for podcasting. If you are a podcaster and you're starting your own podcast, or even thinking about starting your own podcast, I want to leave you with 4 things that you can do in order for you to be celebrating your 200th episode. And so let's go back, man. Let's go back in the beginning. Before I even started this whole podcast journey, a couple of years ago, I found myself going through a transition in relationships. Basically, I was actually going through a divorce, and you guys have heard me definitely give props to my ex-wife, who is one of my oldest friends. And I always preface that when I talk about going through a divorce, because we decided to get divorced. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we kept in place was our friendship, and we were able to do that. We'll talk about that on another episode, or just go back to some of the past episodes. You'll hear me talk about that. But I found myself going through this transition. And one of the things that I realized when I looked back on my dating history is that every relationship that I had ever been in was with a fatherless daughter. And so I wanted to figure out, like, man, for whatever reason, I keep coming in contact with these fatherless daughters, and going into relationships with them. But not only that, but being the person that I am, being the man that I am, and having the heart that I have, my next question was, what could I do in order to help, these women that I'm running into? And so I started a page on Instagram called Friends of Fatherless Daughters. And I would go on the Instagram page and I would just share my thoughts as being a girl dad myself, right? With my daughter is my only biological child. My daughter, at the time of this 200th episode, my daughter is 22 years old. So that almost lines up great with the episode. But my daughter is 22, and so I was giving my opinion from, number one, being a girl dad, number two, being a father, number three, being a brother to five sisters, and also from the viewpoint of watching my dad, because I grew up in a two-parent household with my mom and my dad, but watching my dad raise my five sisters with those different five personalities. And also from my dating history, because I've always dated fatherless daughters for whatever reason. And so I went on to Instagram and I started this page called Friends of Fatherless Daughters. And when I started the page, again, I was just giving my viewpoint, on things that I thought could help fatherless daughters. And I had been doing this for a little while. And one day I was got a message in my DMs from a young lady. I don't remember her name, but I do remember the name of the podcast because I actually went and looked it up today. It's Vanity Talks Podcast. I think that's the name of it. And I don't even know if she's even still doing podcasts at this time. But I went and looked it up, and I was really surprised when I listened to it because it's been so long. It actually released in July in 2021. Was the first podcast period that I had ever been on. So she hit me in the DMs and she was like, would you like to be on my podcast? And I was like, all right, cool. So I did that podcast. Again, it released in July of 2021, the very first podcast I was ever on as a guest, first of all, and had no idea and no thought about even starting my own podcast. But I was asked to be on this podcast. And I said, yeah. So I went and I did that podcast. I did the Vanity Talks podcast. I think it's Vanity Talk Show or Vanity Talks podcast is the name of it. The page is still up on Instagram. The episode is still up. You still can find the episode on Spotify. I don't think it's on YouTube, but you can find it on Spotify. I'm sure it's on Apple Podcasts. I'll put the link in the descriptions too, so you guys can go back and hear that fresh voice, right? Fresh voice. First time I ever been on a podcast, and it was audio only. It didn't even have video when she did it back then. But that was my very first episode as a podcast that I did, and I actually was dropping some jewels in that. I had to go back and listen to it myself, and I think I'm gonna start doing that more often. Go back and listen to some of the other podcasts, not just my podcast that I produce, but some of the other podcasts that I've been guest on. Because right now, I think I'm probably at maybe 50 episodes or something like that I've been on other people podcasts. And even looking to do even more of that in the future to really get back into sharing the mic on other people's platforms, which I really enjoy having conversations on other people's podcasts. Because really, when I get there, then I just get to talk, and I don't even have to be in charge. But anyway, back to the story. So that was the very first podcast that I did on the Vanity Talks podcast episode, and she asked me to do it, and I did it, and it seemed like that was just like the catalyst that kind of pushed me forward. Because right after I did her podcast, I was contacted for maybe about seven different other podcasts, and I did all seven of them. And you can go to my YouTube channel, and when you go to the YouTube channel, there actually is a tab that says Ernest James motivational speaker, and it just have all the other podcast episodes that I've been on other people podcasts. That's a playlist on the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network channel, which I know you guys already subscribed to. Yeah, so I did the first episode that I was asked to be as a guest on a podcast, and then I was contacted for, like I said, about seven other podcasts. Podcasts asking me to come on to their podcast to be a guest, and I did those podcasts as well. And I wanted to shout out to one in particular, which is the Dads on Purpose podcast. And I want to shout out to my man Josh, who was one of the hosts of the Dads on Purpose podcast. And I'm in the Chicagoland area, and Josh actually stays in Texas. And so I was in Texas visiting my daughter, and actually sat down and met with him for lunch. And we had a conversation. And in that conversation, he said that I think you should have your own podcast. And, I was like, all right, I'll think about it. And, kind of was thinking about, what would that look like? What would I want to talk about? What I wanted to do with it. But he planted the seed. And you guys can actually go back to, maybe like the third or fourth episode. He was actually one of my very first guests that I had on the podcast, because I wanted to, show honor to those who opened up the doors for me when I did start my podcast by allowing me to be on their podcast. And so I was on Dads on Purpose. I did that podcast. And like I said, I did maybe about seven different podcasts at that time before I decided to start my own podcast. In the midst of that time period, during that time period, I was looking for some inspiration, right? I was looking for some inspiration, and I went on YouTube just looking for some motivation and inspiration. And I came across this guy called Eric Thomas, Dr. Eric Thomas, which many of you know, number one motivational speaker in the world. And I came across him, and I was watching, some of his videos, some of his content, and really enjoyed it. And one in particular, he was being interviewed. And he was being interviewed by a young guy named David Shands. And so once I watched that interview, I said, well, I kind of like this guy too, this David Shands guy. And so I went to look up who David Shands was. And David Shands actually had at that time, still has, a podcast called Social Proof. And he had started that podcast, and he would talk to different entrepreneurs and things of that nature. And so that kind of began my journey with David, was watching his videos. And then around that same time, David launched his very first Launch Your Podcast Challenge, right? And I signed up for it. I said, all right, let me jump on into this thing, since I said, I had the idea that I wanted to do a podcast. So I jumped into it, took the challenge, took the Start Your Podcast Challenge, and he actually did two, or at least those first two, because he did plenty more by the time we're, at this point. But those were the first two. His first two, I signed up. The first one I signed up for the information. The second one I signed up for the community. And, let me tell you guys, when you find your tribe, right? When you find your tribe, I posted a post not too long ago. So when you find your tribe, life is good, right? And so when I found my tribe, this community of podcasters, getting into podcasting, which I knew nothing about really. Like I said, I had just got into it, just been asked to be a guest on podcast, but I decided, what, I'm going to try this thing out. And so I took David's first Launch Your Podcast Challenge, the first two actually, and went through it and started developing it. And started the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. And I started it, I didn't have no fancy equipment. And this is to all of you guys who are starting something, right? Who are starting anything. I didn't have any fancy equipment. I didn't have the cameras. I didn't have the lights. I didn't have all the stuff that I have now, that I've accumulated over the years. I didn't have this good mic. I didn't have none of these things. All I had was my cell phone, and I started my podcast with my cell phone. The first couple episodes, maybe the first 3 or 4 episodes, was all recorded on my cell phone using StreamYard, which I still use today. And so that's just a testament to you guys when you're going to start something, whether you're starting a podcast, whether you're starting a business, because I also started a business around this time. I started a moving company that I had called Pack Your Shack Moving Company, and I started that company with a small S10 pickup. You know what I mean? I didn't have a box truck at that time. I later would get a box truck, but I didn't have a box truck. All I had was this little S10 pickup. And that's what I used to start my moving company. And so when I came to my podcast, I came with that same mind, start right where I am. Right. And so I want to encourage you guys, when you guys go to start something, start where you are. So I started my podcast with my cell phone because that's all I had at the time. I started my podcast with the cell phone. I went back to those, probably not all 7, but I went back into the people who had asked me to be on their podcast as a guest. I went back to those same people and asked them to be my first guest on my podcast when I started. And those were my first guests. Amongst my first guests were the people who had allowed me to come on, whether it was a live, whether it was a podcast recording, definitely the podcast recordings, but those who have reached out to me to allow me to be on their platforms. I reached out to them first to be my first guest on the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. And that kind of was how it all started. That was how it all started. And even up until now, celebrating 200 episodes, this thing has been growing, right? And so I started with the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, should I say. And along the way, I got some other ideas for podcasts that I wanted to do. And so I also started a podcast with my brother called the Earn and Earth podcast. And we went on that podcast and shared some lessons from our upbringing, some stories from our upbringing, growing up the way that we did with my mom and my dad. And we did, at this time, I think we still at 7 episodes of that podcast. And we kind of took a hiatus, but we're going to be coming back. We're going to be coming back soon with that podcast. And even my brother is going to come back with his own podcast. So again, if you guys haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to the Deal to Heal podcasting network, because we got some great podcasts that's coming your way. So I started the Earn and Earth podcast. And then I went back to my roots of how this thing all started, which was talking to fatherless daughters. And so one of the things I wanted to do was start a podcast that illuminated the relationship with dads and daughters. And so I started the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which is a podcast that I talk to other girl dads and even daughters sometimes to highlight the relationship of the daddy-daughter relationship. And in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter. And so I started that podcast. And at the time of recording this, I think we had maybe 50 something episodes with some more that I actually recorded, like 4 or 5 more episodes that I already have recorded that's still to be released at the time of this recording. So make sure you guys, again, go to the Deal to Heal podcasting network on YouTube and subscribe so that you don't miss those episodes either. And so I started that podcast. And also I helped my sister start her podcast, which is the Faith Talk Love Walk podcast. Forgive me if I said it wrong, Adrian. With my sister had been doing this Bible study, this live Bible study for over like 5 or 6 years live on YouTube, live on Facebook. And so I told her, well, you're already doing the work. Let's turn that into a podcast. So I helped her to kind of formulate it and turn that to a podcast as well. And so that is also on the Deal to Heal podcasting network on YouTube. So we have several podcasts that's there and some more that's coming. But I'm just so excited again, man. Just kind of wanted to go back to the story and tell how it all got started. Because now we're here. We're here celebrating 200 episodes. And I was going to do a whole big, turnout thing and party. But I decided not to do all of that on the podcast. I'll do that later. But instead, I want to just kind of reflect back on how it all started, where we got, how to get here, how we got here to these 200 episodes. And now I just want to leave you with 4 things before I get out of here. 4 things or 4 ways to help you to stay consistent and help you to get to the point if you are doing your own podcast or whatever it is that you're deciding to do with your content. If you are doing your own podcast, 4 things to help you to stay consistent so you can hit your 200th episode and pass, right? And beyond, right? So to infinity and beyond, like Buzz Lightyear said. The first tip that I want to give you guys is find something that you care about, right? Find something that you care about. If you're going to do a podcast, you want to find something that you care about deeply. You don't want to necessarily go with the trends and all of that, because at some point, your viewpoint is going to change. At some point, your heart is going to change. At some point, you just might mature. And the things that you liked at that time when you started your podcast, if you're starting off, going with, something to do with the times, you may grow up out of that, right? So if you're talking about sports, you may get to the point where you're not interested in sports anymore. If you're talking about, crime series or crime shows or crime books or whatever, different things you can outgrow. So find something that you actually care about, that you care deeply about, then that way you know that you'll never really grow out of it. And so when I started thinking about what I wanted to have my podcast to be about, I wanted to be about helping people, because I always say I'm just a person that loves people and love to help people. And so that was what I wanted my podcast to be about. And also, when you find something that you care about, and you care deeply about it, it's easier to find other people who care about it too, right? And so when I went to start looking to finding my guests, I didn't have to look too far, right, to find people who cared about people, because that was the audience that I was coming into. Also, I also joined the Next Level Speakers Academy, right? Shout out to Jeremy Anderson, who I actually saw going back to the beginning on David Shan's Social Proof podcast, right? And so that's how I came across Jeremy Anderson, joined his speakers community. And so a lot of my guests actually were other speakers or are other speakers that is a part of the Next Level Speakers Academy. So, yeah. So when I found out the thing that I love, so when I built the podcast around the thing that I love and I cared about, which is people and caring for other people and helping other people, it wasn't hard for me to find other people who cared about the same thing. And those people became my guests on the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. So the first tip, again, is to find something that you care about. The second tip is to stay consistent. One thing that David Shands always says is consistency is the only cheat code. When you start talking about being successful in this podcasting space, or successful in anything that any endeavor that you take on, a business, anything that you decide to put your mind to, the main thing is to stay consistent. Is it always going to be great? No. Is you always going to feel like it? No. Is it always going to turn out the way that you want it to turn out? No. But if you stay consistent and you remain consistent and build over time, it'll get to where you want it to be. You can build it to where you want it to be. You can develop it to what you want it to become. Whatever that thing is, whether it's a podcast or a business or anything else, you can change it and mold it as you go along. As long as you remain consistent, and constantly work on it, you can create that thing to be whatever you want it to be. And so also I'll give you this, guys, this tip, for those of you who are getting to the podcast space. One of the ways that you can stay consistent with podcasting is to batch your content, right? So what does that mean? That means to record multiple episodes at one time if possible, or to record multiple episodes even if you don't record them at the same time, but allow them to accumulate before you release them. So when I started the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, I actually recorded 10 episodes before I released any. So I recorded 10 episodes, and by releasing an episode a week, that already put me ahead 2 months once I did start releasing the episodes, because I had recorded 10 episodes already. And so that gave me time within those weeks of those 2 months to continually be recording episodes. I recorded 3 days a week. I still record 3 days a week right now, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And that allowed me to constantly be recording episodes, but not being stressed out about the episode that had to come out this week, because I already had a cushion, because I had batched my episodes ahead of time and recorded enough episodes to give myself, time in between, so I don't have to be stressed out about, what episode is supposed to release this week. So that's the number 2. Stay consistent and batch that content. If you are a podcaster, batch that content so that you can stay consistent by still being able to release episodes, because you already got episodes in the storage, right? Third tip that I want to give you guys is believe in yourself. Believe in your vision, right? A lot of times, man, we have a lot of things that happen in our lives. Our visions changes sometimes. We have hardships. We lose jobs, we lose family members. A lot of things change in the midst of our lives. But you have to remain diligent, and you have to believe in your vision, and you have to believe that what it is that is being placed in your heart, that it will come to fruition, as long as you love it, as long as you stay consistent with it, that you can bring it to be. Again, we started from being a guest on a podcast to now being 200 episodes today, 200 episodes of this podcast, the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. And then, like I said, I think the Girl Dad Discussions podcast is like 50 something episodes. The Earn and Earth podcast all started from being asked to be a guest on one podcast. So now we got, over hundreds of podcast episodes that we recorded, because I believe in the vision that I was working toward in this podcasting space. And I still believe, and I'm still investing into my podcast. I actually recently joined, again, going back to David Shands, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. David now is the podcast king, right? And he's also done podcast summits, teaching podcasting to, thousands of people. And I just joined his 7-figure podcast program, which teaches you how to monetize your podcast into multiple streams of income. Again, 7 figures. And so I'm trying to get there. Also, I've dropped the links to that will be in the description. So you guys, if you are a podcaster or thinking about getting into podcasting, you guys can also join the 7-figure podcast program, which I think is awesome. And of course, because we want to, even though we love what we do with the podcasting space, we definitely want to make some money from it as well. And so, yeah, I put that information in the links in the description below, so you guys can also join me in the 7-figure podcast. Also, I'll put the link to the Next Level Speakers Academy as well, with my man Jeremy Anderson, who I joined his speakers Academy, and a lot of the guests that's on the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast has been other speakers that I've came in contact with. But yes, believe in your vision, right? Believe in your vision. And the last tip that I want to give you is to enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride, man. And even me going back and listening to that very first episode today, actually, that I've ever was on a podcast, and listening to that and just hearing where I was, and that was in 2021 when that was released, and hearing where I was even in my life, even as I began to share about the things that I was doing at that time and the vision of where I wanted to go, and to be here today on my 200th episode, being able to reflect back on how far I've came, how the vision has shifted somewhat, how it's changed over the years, but still being able to enjoy this journey that I've been on in the podcasting space, being on over 50 different podcasts as a guest at this point, producing over 200 plus episodes of my own podcast, and just to be really even more involved in this podcasting world and really believe in what it has to offer. And so those are the 4 tips that I leave with you guys, with being able to remain consistent, for your next 200 episodes or your next 200 businesses or your next 200 products, whatever it is that you're on a journey to get to the end of, or to get to that next thing. These are the 4 tips I have given. Find something that you care about. Stay consistent, believe in your vision, and enjoy the journey. And I definitely have enjoyed the journey with you guys today. Man, I really appreciate you guys taking out the time just to listen to me once again for the 200th time, right? The 200th time, the 200th episode here on the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Until next time, you guys be blessed.
Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.